She went to visit her mom, but saw her millionaire husband's car. What she heard inside shattered her life. Hi, my beautiful family, this is our new channel, and today I'm speaking to you with honesty and a heavy heart. You all know what happened to our previous channel. That loss was painful, not just for me, but for everything we built together as a family. There were moments I felt broken, moments I questioned whether I could continue, but your love and support kept me standing. This channel belongs to all of us. I truly need your support now. Please subscribe, because without my family, this journey cannot move forward. Family stands together in difficult times, and today I am asking you to stand with me. Thank you for believing in me, for never giving up, and for being here. A prayer for my family. Heavenly Father, I place every person listening right now into your loving hands. You know their hearts, their worries, and the struggles they carry silently. Please protect their homes, their health, and their loved ones. Fill their lives with peace, strength, and hope. For those facing hardship, bring relief. For those waiting on a miracle, bring answers. For those feeling tired or discouraged, renew their strength. Remove fear and replace it with faith. Turn their pain into purpose and their tears into joy. Bless them for their kindness, loyalty, and love. Lord, walk with my family today and always. Cover them with your mercy and guide them with your light. We trust you completely. Amen. Let's start with love. The dead speak loudest in October, and Clara Hale heard her mother's voice in the autumn wind that rattled through Manhattan streets, 25 years after cancer stole her away. Clara stood at the corner of East 78th Street, her hand wrapped protectively around her 11-year-old son Reed's shoulder, watching the trees shed their golden armor. She had been 4 when her mother died, the same age Reed had been when he first learned to read the danger in his father's voice. Now, at 29, Clara carried her mother's elegance in her high cheekbones and deep brown skin that seemed to capture light rather than merely reflect it. "Your father's car," Reed said quietly, his voice carrying that peculiar steadiness that made him seem older than his years. The observation was simple, but Clara heard the question beneath it. Grant's Mercedes sat precisely parallel, parked outside Iris's townhouse, its black surface gleaming like a predator's eye. Grant Cole had not mentioned visiting Clara's stepmother today. In 11 years of marriage, Grant mentioned very little that mattered. "Perhaps they're discussing the foundation paperwork," Clara offered, though the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. The Hale Foundation, her father's legacy, her inheritance, had become Grant's favorite topic since he'd discovered exactly how much money flowed through its veins. Reed's dark eyes, so like her father's had been, studied her face with that unsettling perception he'd possessed since he was 8. "He told you he had meetings downtown today." Yes, he had. Clara had come to visit Iris out of duty, the same poisonous duty that had shaped her life since she was 4 years old, and her father had carried her through the doors of their estate, presenting a woman whose beauty could stop clocks and whose smile could freeze hell. "This is Iris," her father had said on that spring day 25 years ago, his merchant's hand resting on the 18-year-old woman's back. "She's going to take care of us." Even at 4, Clara had understood that pretty words could carry ugly truths. Iris Penn, who became Iris Hale and then, after Clara's father's death, returned to Iris Penn, had been 14 years older than Clara, but carried herself like European royalty. Her voice flowed like honey over broken glass, sweet enough to disguise the cuts. "Should we leave?" Reed asked, but his feet were already moving toward the townhouse's service alley. Her son had inherited more than his grandfather's eyes. He'd inherited his strategic mind. "We should," Clara agreed, following him, "but we won't." The kitchen window sat cracked open, a habit of Iris's housekeeper who believed in fresh air more than climate control. October's chill carried voices through that narrow gap, voices that would change everything. Played her perfectly. Iris's laugh rippled out, the same laugh that had charmed Clara's father into marriage, that had convinced him his daughter needed a mother's guidance. 11 years, Grant. 11 years of watching you transform that grief-stricken 18-year-old into the perfect, docile wife. She never questioned why I insisted on managing the foundation. Grant's voice carried that particular satisfaction Clara recognized from his business victories. By next quarter, everything will be transferred. The accounts, the properties, her father's entire legacy, all of it will be under my control. Clara's hand found the brick wall, steady against the earthquake in her chest. Beside her, Reed had gone completely still, his body coiled like a spring. "And then?" Iris prompted. "Then we decide what to do with her. Divorce would be messy, but there are other ways to ensure she never challenges the transfers. A nice facility, perhaps. Somewhere quiet. We have documentation of her instability going back years." "The grieving daughter who never recovered from her father's death," Iris mused. "Who married too young, too desperate for stability. Who sees conspiracies where there are none. Really, Grant, you've been masterful. I learned from the best. You spent 14 years preparing her for this, after all. Since she was 4 years old, you've been shaping her into the perfect victim." Their laughter mingled like poison in wine. Clara felt Reed's hand slip into hers, his grip fierce and protective. When she looked down at him, his face held no trace of childhood shock. Instead, she saw something that broke and rebuilt her heart simultaneously. Rage, crystallized into purpose. "We're not going to cry about this, Mom," Reed whispered, his voice carrying the steel she'd forgotten she'd once possessed, before Iris's conditioning, before Grant's controls. "We're going to win." The walk back to their penthouse took 17 minutes. Clara knew because Reed counted them aloud, his voice steady as a metronome, pulling her forward when her legs wanted to collapse. The doorman nodded at them, the elevator operator smiled, and Clara performed the automatic responses that 11 years of training had carved into her bones. Inside their home, Grant's home really, though paid for with her father's money, Reed moved with sudden purpose. He pulled out a notebook from his backpack, the kind with grid paper he used for his advanced mathematics. But instead of equations, he began writing names, dates, fragments of the conversation they'd overheard. "Reed, Dad keeps his important papers in the study," Reed interrupted, his pencil moving steadily. "The one he locks, but he hides the spare key in that fake book on the third shelf. Hemingway. He thinks it's clever." Clara stared at her 11-year-old son. "How do you—" "I watch everything, Mom. I've been watching since I was 8, since the first time I saw him grab your wrist at dinner when you questioned a foundation expense." Reed's eyes never left his notebook. "I have a list. 3 years of things I've seen, heard, noticed. Baby, this is dangerous. We're already in danger." Reed looked up then, and Clara saw herself reflected in his determination, not the broken woman Iris had crafted, but the daughter of Marcus Hale, who had built an empire from nothing, who had taught her about strength before Iris taught her about submission. "They're going to put you away, Mom. They're going to steal everything Grandpa left you, everything he built. And then what happens to me?" The question hung between them like a blade. Clara sank onto the leather sofa, Grant's choice, like everything in this apartment, and pulled Reed close. He came willingly, but kept writing, his hand steady even as he leaned against her. "Your grandfather," Clara began slowly, "once told me that the best revenges are served with proper documentation." Reed's pencil paused. "Grandpa said that?" "He was a businessman, baby. He believed in contracts, evidence, paper trails." Clara took the notebook from Reed's hands, studying his careful notes. "He also kept audio recordings of every important meeting. Did he teach you how? No, Clara admitted, but he taught me how to learn. That night, after Grant returned home smelling of Iris's perfume, a detail Clara would have dismissed yesterday but catalogued today, she played the perfect wife. She served dinner, smiled at his criticism of the seasoning, nodded when he mentioned working late the next several evenings. Reed played his part too, the distant son too absorbed in homework to notice his parents' careful distances. But Clara saw him watching, saw him noting the way Grant's phone buzzed with texts he angled away from view, saw him memorize the combination Grant entered on his briefcase. After Grant retreated to his study with his nightly bourbon, Clara and Reed sat at the kitchen table with his notebook between them. In the margin of his mathematics homework, Reed had written, "Financial forensic accountant, Benjamin Hartley." Below it, a phone number. "How?" Clara whispered. "Grandpa's old lawyer, Mr. Morrison. I emailed him from the school library, said I was doing a project on financial crimes. He recommended Mr. Hartley, said he's the best in Manhattan, that he specializes in uncovering hidden assets and fraud." Clara studied her son, this brilliant, brave child who had been preparing for war while she'd been sleeping through a siege. "Reed, if we do this, when we do this," Reed corrected. "Mom, they started this when you were 4 years old, when Iris looked at a grieving little girl and saw an opportunity, when she married Grandpa for his money, when she waited 14 years to push you into marriage with someone she could control." His voice dropped to a whisper. "When they decided we were just obstacles to remove." Clara pulled her son close, feeling the tremor in his thin shoulders that his voice had hidden. He was 11 years old, forced to be a soldier in a war he hadn't started. But wars didn't wait for children to grow up. Iris had taught her that when she was 4. "Tomorrow," Clara said, "we call Mr. Hartley. And then we learn everything, every document, every secret, every lie they've told." Clara felt something awakening in her chest, something that had been dormant since her father died, since Iris convinced her that 18 was old enough to marry, but too young to manage her own inheritance. "We're going to take back everything they stole." Reed pulled back to look at her, and for the first time in years, Clara saw him truly smile, not the careful expression he wore for his father, but the fierce joy of a warrior who'd finally been given permission to fight. "We're going to win," he said again, and this time Clara believed him. Outside, October's wind rattled the windows like skeleton keys trying locks, and Clara thought she heard her mother's voice again, stronger now. "Fight, baby. It's time to fight." Chapter 2. The Forensic Accountant. Benjamin Hartley's office occupied the 17th floor of a building that whispered old money through its marble bones, the kind of place Clara's father would have approved of, substance over show, quality that didn't need to announce itself. Clara sat with her spine straight, a posture beaten into her by Iris's endless corrections, while Reed occupied the chair beside her with the focused stillness of a chess player. They had waited 3 days to make this appointment, 3 days of performing normalcy while documenting everything with the precision of surgeons. The door opened at precisely 10 o'clock. Benjamin Hartley was not what Clara had expected. Where Grant wore his power in expensive suits and calculated smiles, Benjamin moved with quiet confidence in a simple navy suit that had seen better days. He was 35, according to Reed's research, with sandy hair that fell slightly too long over his collar and green eyes that seemed to catalogue everything without judgment. His handshake was firm but brief, professional but warm. "Mrs. Cole," he said, then turned to Reed with the same respect. "Mr. Cole, Morrison spoke highly of you both." "Just Reed," her son said, studying Benjamin with that intensity that made adults uncomfortable. But Benjamin simply nodded, accepting the correction without the patronizing smile most adults would have offered an 11-year-old. "Reed, then. And please, call me Ben." He moved behind his desk, which held neat stacks of papers and a photograph of a golden retriever, nothing else. Morrison indicated this was urgent but sensitive. "How can I help?" Clara had rehearsed this moment, but Reed spoke first, his voice clear and precise. "My father and my grandmother, step-grandmother, are stealing my mother's inheritance through systematic fraud dating back 25 years. Benjamin's expression didn't change, but his hand reached for a legal pad. "That's a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation," Reed said, pulling out his notebook. "It's a documented pattern." He opened to a page covered in his neat handwriting. "My mother inherited approximately $47 million in assets when my grandfather died 11 years ago. Today, she has signing authority on less than $2 million. Would you like to know where the rest went?" "Reed," Clara said softly, but Benjamin held up a hand. "Please, let him continue." "Reed, yes, I would very much like to know." For the next 20 minutes, Reed laid out what he'd observed, documented, overheard. He spoke like someone 3 times his age, with the devastating precision of someone who'd been collecting evidence since he was 8 years old. Benjamin took notes without interrupting, his expression growing progressively more serious. "The study," Reed concluded. "Everything's in there. The real documents, not the forgeries he shows Mom." "You've seen these documents?" Reed glanced at Clara, who nodded. "Last night, after he took his sleeping pills." From his backpack, Reed produced a phone. Clara hadn't even known he owned one, and showed Benjamin photograph after photograph. Account transfers, property deeds, foundation documents, all bearing Clara's signature. "I never signed these," Clara said quietly. "Half of them are dated when I was recovering from Reed's birth. I had complications, was hospitalized for 3 weeks." Benjamin studied the images, then looked at Clara with those steady green eyes. "Mrs. Cole, Clara. Clara, what they're doing, what they've done, it's not just fraud. It's conspiracy, forgery, theft on a massive scale. But proving it will be dangerous. These people have had 11 years to perfect their system. They'll have lawyers, connections, judges they've contributed to." "We know," Reed said. "That's why we need someone they won't expect, someone who isn't part of their circle. Someone like me." Benjamin leaned back in his chair, studying them both. "I should tell you that I don't usually take cases like this. Corporate fraud, yes. Embezzlement, certainly. But this is personal. This is family." "It's not family," Clara said, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. "Family doesn't plot your destruction from the day they meet you. Iris has been planning this since I was 4 years old." She told him then the whole story. Her mother's death, Iris's arrival, the slow conditioning that taught her to doubt herself, to need approval, to accept criticism as love. Her father's suspicious death just months after her 18th birthday, a heart attack, the doctors said, though he'd had perfect health weeks before. The immediate pressure to marry Grant, Iris's constant presence, guiding her toward a man 15 years older who promised stability. "She told me I was too young to understand business," Clara said. "That Grant would protect me, manage things until I was ready. I've been 29 for 2 years now, and according to them, I'm still not ready." Benjamin wrote steadily through her story, occasionally asking for dates, names, specific details. When she finished, he set down his pen. "The first thing we need," he said, "is everything from that study. But we have to be careful. If Grant suspects, you know." "He won't," Reed interrupted. "He thinks Mom is broken. He thinks I'm just a weird kid who likes math. He doesn't see us as threats." "That's our advantage," Benjamin agreed. "Clara, you'll need to maintain your routine exactly. No changes that might alert them. Reed, you're going to be our researcher. Your age is actually an asset. No one suspects an 11-year-old of building a fraud case." "What about you?" Clara asked. "I'm going to start tracing the money. Every transfer leaves a trail, even the hidden ones, especially the hidden ones. He pulled out a business card, but instead of handing it to Clara, he gave it to Reed. This has my personal cell. If anything feels dangerous, if Grant becomes suspicious or violent, you call immediately. He's never hit her, Reed said quickly. He's too smart for that. He uses other things. Like what? Reed looked at Clara, asking permission. She nodded. Medication. He tells doctors she's depressed, anxious, gets prescriptions in her name. Sometimes he puts them in her food when he thinks she's being difficult. Benjamin's expression darkened. That's assault. Poisoning, technically. It's control, Clara said. Everything with Grant is about control. They spent another hour going through details. Benjamin explained what he would need: bank records, tax returns, any original documents from Clara's father. Reed took notes like a court reporter, asking technical questions that made Benjamin raise his eyebrows. You understand forensic accounting? Benjamin asked. I've been reading about it for 3 years, Reed said simply, since I realized something was wrong. As they prepared to leave, Benjamin stood, walking them to the door. Clara, I need you to understand something. Once we start this, there's no going back. Grant will fight with everything he has. Iris too. They might try to destroy you publicly, claim you're unstable, use your hospitalization against you. They're already destroying me, Clara said. They're just doing it quietly. Benjamin nodded, then did something unexpected. He crouched down to Reed's level, meeting his eyes directly. You're protecting your mother. That's brave. But I need you to promise me something. If this gets dangerous, if you ever feel unsafe, you call me, day or night. Understood? Reed studied him for a long moment, then nodded. You're different from the other adults. How so? You actually see us. That evening, while Grant attended another late meeting that smelled of Iris's perfume, Clara and Reed worked in the study. Reed had been right about the key. Hidden in a hollowed-out Hemingway, the sun also rises. The irony wasn't lost on Clara. The study itself was a shrine to Grant's ego. Diplomas from Harvard, photographs with politicians, awards for charitable giving, all funded by Clara's money, she now realized. But behind the display was the real treasure. Filing cabinets filled with 11 years of methodical theft. Reed photographed everything with the efficiency of a spy, while Clara found documents she'd never seen, powers of attorney she'd never granted, property sales she'd never authorized, foundation disbursements that went directly to accounts in Iris's name. Mom, Reed whispered, holding up a folder marked with last year's date. Look at this. Inside were medical forms, psychiatric evaluations claiming Clara suffered from paranoid delusions, that she was a danger to herself and potentially to her son, all signed by a doctor, Martin Reeves, who, according to the letterhead, had been treating her for 3 years. I've never met this man, Clara breathed. But Grant has, Reed said, showing her a receipt. He's been paying him $15,000 a month. Look, consultation fees. They were building a case for involuntary commitment. The realization hit Clara like ice water. This wasn't just about money. They were planning to have her declared incompetent, locked away, erased. Take pictures of everything, she said, her voice steady despite the fear. Every page. They worked until 3 in the morning, Reed organizing the evidence into categories with the precision that made his teachers call him gifted. Clara found herself watching him, this boy who should have been worried about video games and soccer, instead documenting crimes with the focus of a prosecutor. I'm sorry, she whispered. You shouldn't have to do this. Reed looked up from his phone. Mom, you were 4 when Iris started hurting you. 4. At least I got 11 years before I had to fight back. The next morning, Benjamin called. Can you come to my office? Both of you. I found something. They met him at noon, Grant safely in his downtown office. Benjamin's desk was covered with printouts, bank records, corporate filings. "Your father was murdered," he said without preamble. Clara's knees buckled. Reed caught her arm, guided her to a chair. "The heart attack," Benjamin continued, spreading out papers. "3 weeks before he died, your father changed his will. Originally, everything went to you at 18. The new will created the foundation, with Iris as co-executor, if you married before 25. She knew," Clara whispered. "She knew about the change. She did more than know. She helped write it, and here." Benjamin pulled out another document. "Is a life insurance policy Grant took out on your father. As your husband, he became beneficiary of your beneficiary rights. $5 million, paid out 6 months after the wedding." "But the doctors said—" "The doctor who signed the death certificate was Dr. Martin Reeves." Benjamin let that sink in. "The same doctor now claiming you're delusional. He's been on Grant's payroll for 15 years, since before your father died." Reed stood very still, his young face carved from stone. "They killed him." "We can't prove that," Benjamin said carefully. "But we can prove the fraud, the conspiracy, the theft. That's enough to destroy them." "It's not enough," Reed said quietly. "They took her parents. They stole her life. They need to pay for all of it." Benjamin studied Reed for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Then we'll make them pay. But we do it legally, carefully. We build a case so airtight that no judge, no matter how much Grant has contributed to their campaign, can ignore it." As they left Benjamin's office, Clara felt something shifting inside her, like ice cracking on a frozen river. For 25 years, Iris had shaped her into the perfect victim. For 11 years, Grant had refined that creation, polished it into something useful. But they had made one mistake. They had given her Reed. And Reed, it turned out, had inherited more than his grandfather's eyes and strategic mind. He had inherited his mother's suppressed rage, and he had been sharpening it for 3 years, waiting for the moment she would be ready to use it. That moment was now. Chapter 3. The dinner party trap. Grant announced the investor dinner with the casual cruelty of a man who had forgotten his wife was more than furniture, something to be positioned and displayed. Saturday evening, black tie. Wear the sapphire dress. It makes you look less tired. He didn't look up from his phone as he spoke, his thumb scrolling through messages Clara wasn't permitted to see. "And make sure Reed stays in his room. These are important people." Clara's hands remained steady as she poured his coffee. Colombian, dark roast, 1 sugar, the same every morning for 11 years. "Of course. How many guests?" 12. "Iris will handle the catering." A smile flickered across his face at her stepmother's name. "She has exquisite taste." Yes, Clara thought, remembering Iris at 18, selecting Clara's father like a vintage wine. Exquisite taste in victims. 3 days remained until Saturday. 3 days to prepare what Benjamin had called the recording that would change everything. Clara found herself moving through the penthouse differently now, noting blind spots and acoustic sweet spots with Reed's help. "The alcove by the library," Reed said, Thursday evening, marking it on his hand-drawn floor plan. "Sound carries from there to the kitchen pass-through. And the powder room. Dad never checks there." He had 3 recording devices now, purchased with cash from his saved allowance at different electronics stores. Benjamin had taught him how to hide them, how to ensure clean audio, how to position them for maximum coverage. "You're sure about serving?" Clara asked, watching her 11-year-old son test the weight of a silver serving tray. "Invisible servants hear everything," Reed quoted. Grandpa wrote that in one of his journals. They had found Marcus Hale's journals in the study, hidden behind Grant's collection of first editions. 43 volumes spanning 30 years, documenting not just business dealings but observations, strategies, suspicions. The final entry, dated 2 days before his death, read, "Iris is poison wrapped in silk. Must protect Clara. Must change the will back." He never got the chance. Saturday arrived wrapped in autumn rain that turned Manhattan into an impressionist painting. Clara stood before her mirror, fastening her mother's pearls around her neck, the only jewelry Grant hadn't claimed for safekeeping. The sapphire dress fell perfectly, as Grant had known it would. He had exceptional taste in cages. "You look beautiful, Mom," Reed said from the doorway, dressed in his server's outfit, black pants, white shirt, bow tie. He looked older, she realized. The past weeks had carved away whatever softness remained in his face. "You don't have to do this," she said again. "Yes, I do." He checked his phone, ensuring the recording apps were ready. "Benjamin's counting on us. Grandpa's counting on us." Grant emerged from his dressing room in a tuxedo that cost more than most people's cars, his silver hair gleaming like armor. At 44, he remained handsome in that calculated way that photographed well at charity galas. Clara remembered being 18, thinking his attention meant she was special, not realizing she was simply valuable. "Remember," he said, adjusting his cufflinks, "you're there to look gracious, not to speak. These are sophisticated people. They don't need to hear about whatever you've been reading." "Of course," Clara murmured, the perfect response delivered in the perfect tone. The guests arrived in a cascade of European cars and inherited wealth. Clara recognized half of them from foundation events, people who smiled at her like she was a well-trained pet, who spoke around her even when she stood between them. Iris arrived last, because queens always make entrances. At 43, Clara's stepmother had refined her beauty into a weapon. Her dress, winter white, despite the season, made her pale skin glow like moonlight. Her blonde hair, which had once fallen in careful waves, was now sculpted into an elegant chignon that exposed the diamonds at her throat, diamonds that had belonged to Clara's mother. "Darling," Iris purred, kissing Clara's cheek with lips that left no mark. "You look lovely. That dress always suited you." Always. As if Iris had been dressing Clara in costumes her whole life, which Clara supposed she had. The dinner progressed with choreographed precision. Reed moved between guests like a ghost, refilling glasses, offering canapes, invisible in that particular way of service staff. But Clara saw him positioning himself strategically, saw his phone tucked behind a vase where it could capture the room, saw him memorizing every conversation. "The Foundation's assets have never been stronger," Grant was saying to Harrison Beck, a hedge fund prince with cocaine eyes. "We're moving into offshore investments. Better returns, fewer questions." "Clara must be thrilled," Harrison said, his gaze finding her across the room. "All that charity work finally paying dividends." "Clara trusts me to handle the complex matters," Grant replied smoothly. "She prefers to focus on simpler things." Laughter rippled through the group, the kind that sliced without leaving visible wounds. It was during the third course, duck confit that Iris had selected, that Clara noticed Grant and Iris exchange a look. A tiny nod, a shared understanding built over years of conspiracy. They excused themselves moments apart, Iris heading toward the powder room, Grant mentioning a phone call. Reed materialized at Clara's elbow. "The library," he whispered, then louder. "More wine, Mrs. Cole." "Please," she said, watching him disappear with his tray. Clara waited exactly 3 minutes, long enough to seem natural, before following. She found Reed in the hallway, his phone already recording, positioned behind a Chinese vase they'd identified earlier. Through the library door, voices drifted like smoke. "Almost there," Grant was saying. "The psychiatric evaluations are complete. Reeves says another month, maybe 2, and we'll have enough for involuntary commitment." "And Reed?" Iris asked. "Boarding school in Switzerland, or military academy, somewhere that will fix whatever's wrong with him." "Nothing's wrong with him. He's just too much like Marcus," too observant. Well, we can't have that. Grant's laugh was ugly. Speaking of Marcus, did you ever regret it? Regret what? Marrying him. Please, 18 years old with nothing but good looks and determination. He was my lottery ticket. I meant the digitalis. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Beside her, Reed had gone rigid. It was necessary, Iris said simply. He was going to change the will back, cut me out completely. 22 years of playing devoted wife, wasted. The digitalis was elegant, mimics a heart attack perfectly, and Reeves was happy to sign off for the right price. 40,000, wasn't it? 50, inflation. They laughed together, the sound like breaking glass. Besides, it worked out better. Clara inherited everything, then married you, and now we have it all. Or will, once she's safely tucked away somewhere quiet. The Whitmore Institute, Grant said. Private, discreet, excellent at handling difficult cases. I've already made the arrangements. When? After the foundation gala next month. She'll have a very public breakdown. Poor thing, the stress of all that responsibility finally breaking her. No one will question it. And the boy? Gone the same night. By the time anyone thinks to investigate, he'll be in Switzerland and she'll be too medicated to remember her own name. Reed's hand found Clara's in the darkness, squeezing hard enough to hurt. But she welcomed the pain. It kept her standing, kept her from screaming. We should get back, Iris said. Separately, of course. Of course. Oh, and Iris, wear something stunning to the gala. It'll be Clara's last public appearance. We should make it memorable. They listened to footsteps fade, counted to 100. Then Reed retrieved his phone with hands that barely trembled. We got it, he whispered. All of it. Back in the dining room, Clara performed miracles. She smiled at the appropriate moments, laughed at Harrison's crude jokes, accepted compliments on the duck she hadn't cooked. She was brilliant in her emptiness, perfect in her practiced responses. No one noticed her hands shaking beneath the table. No one except Reed, who appeared at her elbow with water when the room grew too hot, who created small diversions when her smile threatened to crack. Iris returned, glowing with secret satisfaction. Grant followed minutes later, his hand finding Clara's shoulder in a gesture that looked affectionate but felt like a shackle. Ladies and gentlemen, Grant announced, raising his champagne, a toast to the future, to smart investments, loyal partnerships, and the wisdom to know when to let go of what no longer serves us. Everyone raised their glasses. Clara drank champagne that tasted like ashes. And, Grant continued, his hand tightening on Clara's shoulder, to my beautiful wife, who makes all of this possible. More laughter, knowing looks. They all knew, Clara realized. Every person in this room knew she was the golden goose, knew Grant had married her for her money, knew Iris had orchestrated it all. They knew and they participated in the fiction because it benefited them. Thank you, Clara said, her voice carrying for the first time all evening. You're all too kind. Grant's fingers dug deeper, warning. But Clara smiled up at him with 25 years of practiced submission. I'm so grateful for everything you've done for me, darling. Everything. Something flickered in his eyes, suspicion perhaps, or just annoyance at her speaking out of turn, but Harrison Beck was already launching into a story about his latest yacht purchase, and the moment passed. The evening wound down with cognac and cigars for the men, coffee and condescension for the women. Reed cleared plates with mechanical precision, but Clara saw him pause by Grant's jacket, saw something small disappear into his pocket. Finally, the last guest departed. Iris lingered, helping Clara with some pretense about checking the catering bill. You did well tonight, Iris said, studying Clara with those cold blue eyes that had evaluated her since she was 4. Grant was pleased. I live to please him, Clara replied. Iris's perfect eyebrow arched. Do you? Sometimes I wonder if there's more going on in that pretty head than you let on. You taught me well, Iris. A woman's power is in what she doesn't say. I taught you to be obedient. Don't confuse the two. She left in a cloud of French perfume and unspoken threats. Grant was already in his study with his bourbon when Clara checked on Reed in his room. He sat at his desk, transferring the recordings to multiple USB drives. "Mom," he said without looking up. "I got into his phone." "What?" Reed held up Grant's phone. She hadn't even noticed him take it. "He uses your birthday as his password. Arrogant and stupid." His fingers flew across the screen. "I'm forwarding everything to Benjamin. Emails, texts, financial records, everything." "Reed, if he catches you..." "He won't. I'll put it back when he passes out. He's on his third bourbon." Clara sat on Reed's bed, her body finally allowing itself to shake. "They killed him. They killed my father." Reed abandoned the phone, coming to sit beside her. "I know. Digitalis. It's from foxglove. Iris grew foxglove in the garden. I remember thinking it was so pretty. We're going to stop them, Mom. We have everything now. The confession, the conspiracy, proof of murder. It won't bring him back." "No," Reed agreed, his 11-year-old voice carrying impossible weight. "But it will give him justice, and it will give us freedom." They sat together in the dark, mother and son, conspirators in their own home. Outside, Manhattan glittered with its million small dramas, but inside Reed's room, they planned the destruction of an empire built on a 4-year-old's grief. Grant's phone buzzed with a text. Reed glanced at it and laughed, sharp and bitter, too old for his years. "It's from Iris," he said, showing Clara the screen. "Sweet dreams, darling. Soon we'll have everything we deserve." "Yes," Clara said, saving the screenshot. "You certainly will." Chapter 4. The Midnight Trail. Reed Cole moved through midnight Manhattan like smoke through a keyhole, present but barely there, a shadow with purpose that the city's insomniacs would forget by morning. It was Thursday, 3 days after the dinner party, and Grant had left the penthouse at 11:47 p.m., claiming a conference call with Tokyo. But Reed had seen the text on his father's phone before returning it, not Tokyo, but the Meridian Club on East 56th, where memberships cost more than most people's homes and secrets were currency. Clara had tried to stop him. "It's too dangerous," she'd said, but Reed had shown her the text that made her resistance crumble. "Bringing the lawyer. Final papers for C's commitment. Need your signature. C for Clara." His mother, reduced to an initial, a problem to be solved. Reed had prepared for this. Dark clothes that wouldn't catch light, soft-soled shoes that whispered rather than clicked, a phone fully charged with recording apps ready. In his pocket, the subway card Benjamin had given him. "For emergencies," the forensic accountant had said, but his eyes had suggested he knew Reed would define emergency loosely. The doorman barely glanced up as Reed slipped out. Children of the wealthy were given certain freedoms, especially strange, quiet children who were known for their odd habits. Reed had cultivated his reputation carefully. The weird kid who collected insects, who walked at strange hours, who was too smart for his own good. It was camouflage as effective as any combat gear. Manhattan at midnight was a different creature than its daytime self. The financial district's glass towers became dark monoliths, the streetlights casting pools of yellow that Reed skirted carefully. He knew Grant would take a taxi. His father had patterns, predictable in his arrogance. Reed took the subway, then walked, keeping to the shadows cast by scaffolding and awnings. The Meridian Club squatted between a diplomatic residence and a private gallery, its facade deliberately unremarkable. Old money didn't advertise, but Reed knew its tells. The doorman whose suit cost more than a teacher's monthly salary, the cars parked outside that whispered rather than roared, the way light from inside was warm amber, not the harsh fluorescent of common spaces. Reed couldn't enter, of course. But the club's architects, in their last-century wisdom, had included a smoking terrace that overlooked a narrow alley, and that alley had a fire escape on the opposite building, probably predating the club itself, that provided perfect sightlines if you were small enough to climb it and brave enough to perch 3 stories up in the dark. Reed was both. He climbed quickly, his 11-year-old body light enough that the old metal barely complained. Years of martial arts, Grant's idea, thinking it would make Reed less soft, had given him balance and strength. He settled onto a landing that put him level with the terrace, pulled out his phone, and switched to the camera's night mode. The terrace doors were open. October had turned unseasonably warm, and rich men liked their cigars with fresh air. Voices drifted across the alley, mixing with distant sirens and the ever-present hum of the city. Grant appeared first, his silver hair catching the light. Behind him, a man Reed recognized from the photographs in Benjamin's files, Lawrence Ashford, senior partner at Ashford, Klein and Associates, the kind of lawyer who had judges on speed dial and ethics on ignore. "Paperwork is bulletproof," Ashford was saying, lighting a cigar that probably cost more than most people's groceries. "Dr. Reeves has been brilliant. 3 years of documented instability, medication non-compliance, paranoid delusions. Any judge will sign the commitment order." "And the boy?" Grant asked. "Switzerland. The Edelweiss Academy has agreed to take him immediately. They specialize in difficult children, full boarding, no communication with the outside world for the first year. They'll fix whatever's wrong with him." Reed's hand tightened on his phone, but he kept recording. "There's nothing wrong with him," Grant said, surprising Reed. "He's just too smart, sees too much, like his grandfather." "Well, intelligence without proper guidance can be dangerous. The academy will teach him appropriate boundaries." They moved closer to the railing, and Reed had to strain to hear. "What about the foundation assets?" Grant asked. "Once Clara is committed, you'll have full power of attorney. The transfers can happen immediately. We've already set up the offshore accounts, Cayman, Switzerland, a few in Panama for diversity. Iris's name won't appear anywhere as requested." "Good. She's been patient for 25 years. She deserves her payday." Ashford laughed, ugly and low. "Patient? She planned this from the moment she met Marcus Hale. 18 years old and already playing the long game. You have to admire it." "I do more than admire it," Grant said, and something in his voice made Reed's stomach turn. "Iris is a visionary. She saw a grieving widower with a 4-year-old daughter and thought, 'There's my fortune.' Then she saw that daughter grow up and thought, 'There's my double fortune.' Brilliant." "And you? When did you get involved?" "She approached me 15 years ago. I was working at her father's firm. Did you know Iris comes from money too? Old textile fortune, all gone by the time she was 16. Her father drank it away. She learned early that beauty fades, but bank accounts, properly managed, are forever." Reed shifted position carefully, his foot finding better purchase on the narrow landing. A pigeon cooed somewhere above him, the city's only witness to his surveillance. "So she came to you," Ashford prompted. "She knew I was ambitious, hungry. She also knew I had flexible ethics. She proposed a partnership. She'd guide Clara toward me, I'd marry her, and together we'd take everything. It was supposed to be simple. But Clara had a child. Reed complicated things. He watches, notices things. Last week, I caught him in my study." Reed's blood chilled. "He said he was looking for a book," Grant continued, "but I know he was snooping. We need to move faster. The gala is in 3 weeks. Too long, this weekend. We'll stage something at the foundation. Clara's been working on some new exhibit. We'll say she had a psychotic break, destroyed it, attacked someone. Iris will be there as a witness, of course. This weekend. That's ambitious. It's necessary. I have a feeling." Grant paused, looking out over the city. For a moment, His gaze swept toward Reed's hiding spot, and Reed held his breath, pressing himself against the cold metal. "I have a feeling we're running out of time." They went back inside, but Reed waited, patient as a spider. 20 minutes later, they returned with brandy and another man, Dr. Martin Reeves himself, thin and nervous, with hands that shook until he downed his drink. "I don't like this acceleration," Reeves was saying. "The documentation needs to appear organic, accumulated over time." "You've had 3 years," Grant interrupted. "How much more organic do you need?" "But if someone investigates, who's going to investigate?" Ashford asked. "A concerned stepmother and a devoted husband committing a clearly unstable woman for her own good. It's a tragedy, not a crime. The boy might talk. The boy will be in Switzerland before anyone can ask him questions." Grant's voice had turned cold. "Unless you'd prefer we revisit our arrangement regarding Marcus Hale's death certificate." Reeves went pale. "That's not necessary." "Then stop whining and do your job. I want those commitment papers ready by tomorrow. Full psychiatric hold, indefinite duration, no visitors without my express permission. And her assets become mine to manage as her loving husband and only advocate." Grant raised his glass. "Gentlemen, to the end of a very long game." They toasted, their glasses catching the light like small fires. Reed had heard enough. He descended the fire escape slowly, each step deliberate, his mind already racing through contingency plans. They had moved up the timeline. This weekend, 2 days away. He needed to get to Benjamin. Now. But as he reached the ground, a hand fell on his shoulder. Reed's training kicked in. He twisted, dropped, rolled away, coming up in a defensive stance his instructor would have praised. But the figure stepping from the shadows wasn't a threat. It was Benjamin Hartley, dressed in dark clothes similar to Reed's, a small smile on his face. "Good reflexes," Benjamin said quietly. "Though next time, check for backup exits before climbing. That fire escape only has one way down." "You followed me?" "I followed Grant. Saw you on the fire escape. Figured you had the recording covered, so I documented his arrival, the cars, license plates, evidence of the meeting." Benjamin held up his own phone. "Your mother called me when you left. She was terrified. She didn't stop me, number because she knew you were right to go." Benjamin crouched down to Reed's level. "What did you hear?" Reed told him everything, his perfect memory recreating the conversation word for word. Benjamin's expression grew progressively darker. "This weekend," he murmured. "We're not ready. We have to be." Benjamin studied Reed for a long moment. "You're 11 years old." So you shouldn't have to be this brave." "My mom was 4 when Iris started destroying her. Brave doesn't have an age requirement." Benjamin stood, and Reed saw something shift in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "You're right. Come on. I'll take you home. We need to plan." They walked through empty streets, Benjamin keeping Reed on the inside of the sidewalk, automatically protective. Reed found himself studying the man, the way he moved with quiet confidence, the way he scanned their surroundings without seeming paranoid, the way he treated Reed as an equal, not a child. "You like my mom," Reed said suddenly. Benjamin's step faltered slightly. "She's my client." "That's not an answer." "No," Benjamin agreed. "It's not." They walked in silence for a block before he continued. "Your mother is remarkable. What she's survived, what she's fighting through, most people would have broken years ago. She almost did break, but she didn't, and that's what's remarkable." Benjamin glanced down at Reed. "You saved her, you know. Your courage gave her permission to find her own. We saved each other." "Yes," Benjamin said softly. "You did." They reached the penthouse building at 2:17 a.m. The doorman was asleep at his desk, and they slipped past like ghosts. In the elevator, Benjamin handed Reed a USB drive. Everything I've found so far. Financial records going back 15 years. Your father, Grant, has been stealing from your mother since before they married. Small amounts at first, test runs, then bigger, bolder. He's taken approximately $31 million. $31 million, Reed repeated, his young mind trying to comprehend the number. Your grandfather built something beautiful, Reed. The foundation was meant to help people, to be a legacy of kindness. Grant and Iris turned it into their personal bank account. The elevator opened on the penthouse floor. Clara was waiting in the hallway, still in her clothes from earlier, her face drawn with worry. When she saw Reed, she pulled him into a fierce hug. "Don't ever do that again," she whispered. "I had to, Mom." "I know." She pulled back, looking at Benjamin over Reed's head. "Thank you for watching him." "He didn't need much watching. Your son is exceptionally capable." Benjamin handed her another USB drive. Reed got the recording. It's damning. Murder confession, conspiracy, fraud, everything. "This weekend," Reed said. "They're moving this weekend." Clara's face went pale, but her voice remained steady. "Then we move faster." They stood in the hallway, three conspirators united by necessity and something deeper, a shared recognition of injustice that demanded correction. The penthouse door loomed behind them, and beyond it, Grant slept off his brandy, unaware that his perfect crime had been perfectly documented by an 11-year-old boy with his grandfather's eyes and his mother's awakening rage. "We need to call Morrison," Benjamin said, "the old lawyer. He has connections, judges who knew your father who aren't in Grant's pocket." "It's 2 a.m, Clara protested. "He'll answer," Reed said with certainty. "He loved Grandpa. He'll answer." And he did. Within an hour, they had a plan. Within 2 hours, they had a judge willing to review an emergency petition. Within 3 hours, as dawn painted Manhattan in shades of amber and gold, they had what they needed. A temporary restraining order, preventing Grant from moving any assets or making any medical decisions for Clara. Grant would wake to find his perfect plan in ruins. But more importantly, Clara would wake to find herself free, or at least beginning to be free. 25 years of chains couldn't be broken in a single night, but they could begin to crack. Chapter 5. Building the Case. Saturday arrived dressed in false normalcy, Grant reading his Financial Times over Colombian coffee, while Clara arranged Reed's weekend schedule with the precision of a general planning a campaign. "Museum trip this morning," she said, her voice steady as her hands. "The Egyptian exhibit Reed's been researching." Grant didn't look up. "Fine, take the car." He had no idea that the museum trip was actually a meeting at Benjamin's office, where a team of forensic accountants had been working through the night, following the money like bloodhounds on a scent. The restraining order remained their secret weapon, filed but not yet served. Benjamin had advised waiting. Let Grant and Iris believe their plan was proceeding while they built an ironclad case. "We have one shot," Benjamin had said. "If we strike too early, they'll destroy evidence, move assets we haven't found yet." So Clara performed her morning ritual. Grant's coffee, his preferred breakfast, the right amount of deference mixed with distance. She'd become an actress worthy of Broadway, though her stage was a Manhattan penthouse, and her audience a man who'd helped murder her father. Reed sat across from Grant, eating cereal with mechanical precision, his notebook beside him. To Grant, it looked like homework. In reality, Reed was memorizing the timeline Benjamin had constructed, preparing for the testimony he would eventually give. "You're quiet this morning," Grant observed, his predator's instinct flickering. "Math test Monday," Reed replied without missing a beat. "Differential equations." "You're 11. "Gifted program," Reed said, allowing a hint of pride that Grant would interpret as normal childhood boasting. Mr. Harrison says I could skip to high school math next year. Grant's interest faded. A smart child was useful for reputation. A genius child was a complication he'd rather avoid. At 10 o'clock, Clara and Reed left for their museum trip. Grant didn't watch them go. He was already on a call with Ashford, which Reed knew because he'd planted a listening device in Grant's study phone 2 nights ago. Benjamin's office had transformed into a war room. Whiteboards covered with financial flows, boxes of documents dating back decades, 3 other accountants Benjamin had brought in, all of them working for free because, as one said, Marcus Hale was a good man, and what they did to his family is unconscionable. Clara, Reed, Benjamin stood as they entered, and Clara noticed the shadows under his eyes, the way his usually neat hair was disheveled. He'd been here all night. You need to sleep, she said without thinking. Later. Look at this. He led them to a wall covered in photographs and documents connected by red string, like a conspiracy theorist's dream. We've traced every dollar. Grant wasn't just stealing. He was using your money to fund other crimes, bribes to city officials for construction contracts, paying off health inspectors, even funding campaigns for judges who would be sympathetic. My money built his corruption network, Clara said quietly. Your father's money, Reed corrected. Grandpa would be furious. He'd be proud, said a voice from the doorway. James Morrison entered, the elderly lawyer moving carefully but with purpose. At 81, he looked like parchment wrapped around steel. Marcus always knew Iris was poison. He just didn't know how deep it went. Morrison had brought reinforcements, 2 federal prosecutors who specialized in financial crimes, a judge who'd been Marcus's golf partner, and surprisingly, a woman Clara vaguely recognized. Dorothy Chen, the woman introduced herself. I was your father's secretary for 10 years. I've been keeping copies of things Iris didn't know existed. She placed a box on the table. Inside were letters, documents, recordings on old cassette tapes. Your father suspected Iris was having an affair his last year, Dorothy explained. He hired a private investigator. These are his reports. Clara opened the first folder and gasped. Photographs of Iris and Grant from 15 years ago, before Clara's marriage, before her father's death. They'd been planning this for longer than anyone imagined. There's more, Dorothy said gently. The investigator found evidence that Iris had done this before. Her first husband, when she was 16, he died of a heart attack too. She inherited just enough to move to New York, reinvent herself. She's a serial killer, Reed said flatly. She kills for money. We can't prove the murders, one of the prosecutors said, but we can prove everything else. Fraud, conspiracy, theft, forgery. Grant and Iris are looking at 20 to 30 years. They worked through the afternoon, Reed surprising everyone with his ability to spot patterns in financial data. At one point, he connected 3 shell companies to a property in the Hamptons that Grant had bought with Clara's funds, but registered in his mother's name. His mother died 5 years ago, Reed said. So who's signing the tax documents? Benjamin checked, his fingers flying across his laptop. Grant. He's been forging his dead mother's signature to hide assets. Add mail fraud to the charges, Morrison said with satisfaction. As the sun set over Manhattan, painting the office golden, Clara found herself standing at the window beside Benjamin. Reed was across the room, explaining something complex to the prosecutors with the patience of a professor. He's extraordinary, Benjamin said quietly. He shouldn't have to be. Number. But he is. And that's going to save you both. Clara turned to look at him. Really look at him. Benjamin Hartley, who'd dropped everything to help them, who'd worked without sleep, who treated her son with respect and her with something she couldn't quite name. Why? She asked. Why do all this? We're just clients. Benjamin was quiet for a long moment. My father was a whistleblower, exposed corruption at his company. They destroyed him, legally, financially, personally. He died broken, believing justice was a fairy tale rich people told to keep poor people hoping. I'm sorry. I became a forensic accountant to prove him wrong, to show that sometimes, with enough evidence and the right people, justice can win. He looked at her, and Clara felt something shift in her chest. You and Reed aren't just clients. You're proof that my father was wrong to give up hope. Before Clara could respond, Reed called out, "Mom, I found something." He was holding a document from Dorothy's box, a life insurance policy on Clara herself, taken out by Grant 3 months after their marriage. $10 million, Reed read. Beneficiary, Grant Cole. Secondary beneficiary, Iris Penn. The room went silent. They were going to kill me, Clara said, her voice remarkably steady. The commitment was just the first step. Once I was locked away, helpless. An unfortunate suicide, Morrison said grimly. Depressed woman, history of mental illness, isolated from her son. No one would question it. Except Reed would, Benjamin said. That's why he had to disappear to Switzerland first. Clara pulled Reed close, feeling him tremble against her. 11 years old and discovering his father had planned to murder his mother. We're going to stop them, Reed said, his voice muffled against her shoulder. We're going to stop them, and they're going to pay. Yes, Clara said, looking around the room at these people who'd assembled to help them. Morrison with his decades of legal expertise, Dorothy with her carefully preserved evidence, the prosecutors with their federal authority, and Benjamin with his unwavering determination. They're going to pay for all of it. Morrison's phone rang. He answered, listened, then smiled, a sharp, predatory expression that reminded Clara why her father had kept him on retainer for 30 years. That was Judge Patterson. She's reviewed our preliminary filing. She's issuing arrest warrants for Monday morning. He looked at Clara. The gala is tomorrow night. They'll be arrested there, publicly, in front of everyone who enabled them. Poetic justice, Dorothy murmured. The best kind, Morrison agreed. They worked until midnight, preparing the final documentation. Reed fell asleep on the office sofa, his head in Clara's lap, still clutching his notebook. Benjamin covered him with his jacket, the gesture so gentle it made Clara's throat tight. You should rest too, Benjamin said. Tomorrow will be difficult. 25 years of difficult are ending tomorrow, Clara replied. I can handle one more day. As they prepared to leave, Benjamin handed Clara an envelope. What's this? Open it tomorrow, after everything happens. Clara tucked it into her purse, another secret in a life that had become built on them. The ride home was quiet, Reed sleeping against her shoulder in the back of the car Benjamin had arranged, not Grant's driver, who reported everything but someone trustworthy. Grant was asleep when they arrived, his bedroom door closed, his snoring audible from the hallway. Clara tucked Reed into bed, kissing his forehead. Mom, he murmured, half awake. Yes, baby. Tomorrow, when they arrest him, will you be sad? Clara considered the question. I'll be sad for what should have been, for the life we deserved but didn't get. But sad about Grant going to prison? No. Good, Reed said, already drifting back to sleep. Because he was never really my father anyway. Fathers protect. He only destroyed. Clara sat beside his bed long after he fell asleep, watching her son breathe, thinking about protection and destruction, about the men who'd shaped their lives. Her father who'd loved but been deceived, Grant who'd promised protection but delivered imprisonment, and Benjamin who asked for nothing but offered everything. Tomorrow, at the gala her father had founded to celebrate philanthropy and kindness, Grant and Iris would fall. Their empire of lies would crumble in front of the people who'd helped them build it. It would be, Clara thought, what her father would have called a hostile takeover, except this time she was taking back what had always been hers. Chapter 6. The Night Before Justice. Sunday dawned grey and restless, Manhattan sky wearing mourning colours as if it knew what was coming. The gala was 12 hours away, and Grant moved through the penthouse like a king surveying his kingdom one last time. He didn't know it was his last time. Clara watched him from the kitchen as she prepared breakfast, noting the satisfaction in his movements, the way he actually hummed, while reviewing papers in his study. The commitment documents, she knew. Benjamin had confirmed through his contacts that Dr. Reeves had delivered them yesterday. "You seem happy," she said, bringing him his coffee. Grant looked up, surprised by her observation. In 11 years, she rarely initiated conversation beyond the necessary. "The foundation's doing well," he said, the lie flowing smooth as silk. "Tonight's gala should raise another $1 million for the children's ward." The children's ward he'd been stealing from. Clara's hand remained steady as she set down the cup. "Reed's looking forward to it," she said. "His first formal gala." "Reed's not coming." Grant's voice was flat, final. "It's an adult event. I've arranged for Mrs. Patterson to watch him." Mrs. Patterson, who worked for Grant, who would ensure Reed was home when the emergency happened, when Clara was taken away. "Of course," Clara said, but she was already texting Benjamin under the table. They'd anticipated this. Reed appeared in the doorway, still in his pajamas, looking younger than his 11 years. It was deliberate. He'd chosen the dinosaur pajamas Grant had bought him 2 years ago, never worn, to appear as the child Grant wanted him to be. "Morning, Dad," he said, and Clara heard the effort it took to say that word. "Reed, your mother says you're studying today." "Yes, sir. Math test tomorrow." Grant had already dismissed him, turning back to his papers. Reed met Clara's eyes, a quick flash of understanding, then padded toward the kitchen. The rest of the morning was choreographed normalcy. Clara selected her gown for the evening, emerald green, her father's favorite color on her. Reed studied at the dining table where Grant could see him being quiet and studious. They played their parts perfectly while beneath the surface. Everything churned. At noon, Iris called. "Darling!" Her voice dripped through the phone like honey laced with cyanide. "I need you to come early tonight. There's a special presentation for Grant, a surprise. Can you have him there by 6? "Of course," Clara replied, knowing the surprise was meant to be her public breakdown, her removal, her erasure. "And Clara, wear something memorable. Tonight's going to be photographed extensively." Yes, Clara thought, it certainly would be. After lunch, while Grant was on a conference call, Morrison arrived under the pretense of delivering foundation documents. But Reed let him in through the service entrance, and they met in Reed's room, the one place Grant never entered. "Everything's in place," Morrison whispered. "Federal agents will be positioned at all exits. Judge Patterson will be attending as a guest. The moment Grant and Iris make their move against you, we spring the trap." "What if they don't?" Clara asked. "They will," Reed said with certainty. "They're too arrogant to imagine they could fail." Morrison handed Clara a small device. "Panic button. Press it if things go wrong before we're ready." "And Reed?" "I'll be with him." Benjamin's voice came from the doorway. He'd entered silently, dressed as building maintenance. "The moment you leave for the gala, I'm getting him out. Safe house until it's over." "I want to be there," Reed protested. "No." Clara's voice was firm. "You've done enough, baby. More than enough." Reed's jaw set in that stubborn line she recognized from her father. "They killed Grandpa. They stole our lives. I deserve to see them fall." "You will," Benjamin promised. "On the news, from somewhere safe." They ran through the plan once more. Clara would attend with Grant, play the perfect wife, wait for Grant and Iris to make their move. The commitment papers required Clara to be declared incompetent in front of witnesses, which Iris would orchestrate. The moment they tried, the feds would move in. "Clear?" Morrison asked. Everyone nodded. Then God help us all, the old lawyer said. And Marcus, if you're watching, we're about to give you one hell of a show. At 4 o'clock, Clara began preparing for the gala. She moved through her routine, shower, hair, makeup, with the precision of a soldier preparing for battle. The emerald gown slipped over her skin like armor. Her mother's pearls, the only jewelry Grant hadn't taken, circled her throat like protection. Reed watched from her doorway. "You look like a queen." "I look like my mother," Clara said, seeing her reflection clearly for the first time in years. Not the broken woman Iris had crafted, not the submissive wife Grant had molded, but Amelia Hale's daughter, strong, beautiful, unbreakable. "Mom," Reed said quietly, "I wrote you something." He handed her an envelope. "Don't read it until after. Promise?" "Promise." Grant emerged from his dressing room in his tuxedo, and Clara saw him differently now, not as the powerful man who'd controlled her life, but as what he was, a thief, a liar, a murderer by association. He was smaller somehow, diminished by the truth of him. "You look acceptable," he said, his highest compliment. "Thank you." They moved toward the door, Grant's hand on her elbow, possessive as always. Reed stood by his room, small and alone, and Clara's heart broke a little. "Be good for Mrs. Patterson," Grant said without looking at his son. "Yes, sir." But Clara saw Reed's hand hidden behind his back, making a small thumbs up. Benjamin was already in position. The ride to the hotel was silent. Grant texted constantly, Iris probably, confirming their plan. Clara stared out the window at the city flowing past, wondering if her father had felt this way the night he died, if he'd known something was coming but couldn't quite see its shape. The St. Regis Hotel rose before them like a gilded cage, its windows reflecting the dying sun. Photographers clustered at the entrance, society reporters ready to document New York's elite at play. "Smile," Grant commanded as they exited the car. Clara smiled. It was the last order she would ever take from him. Inside, the ballroom had been transformed into what looked like heaven. White silk, crystal, thousands of roses. Her father's foundation logo dominated the space, a reminder of what this had once meant, what it was supposed to be. "Clara!" Iris glided toward them in a white gown that made her look like a predatory angel. "You look adequate." Even now, at the end, she couldn't resist the small cuts. "Thank you, Iris. You look exactly as you are." Iris's eyes narrowed slightly, sensing something different but unable to place it. The room filled with Manhattan's wealthy, people who'd known Clara since childhood, who'd watched her father build his empire, who'd stood silent as Grant and Iris destroyed her. They smiled at her now, empty smiles that meant nothing. But then Clara spotted them. Federal agents, discreet but present. Judge Patterson by the bar, Morrison at a corner table, even Dorothy Chen, brave enough to attend, despite everything. Her army assembled. "Ladies and gentlemen," Iris's voice rang out as she took the microphone. "Before we begin the fundraising, I wanted to share something special about the Hale Foundation's future." Here it comes, Clara thought. "For 11 years, Iris continued, my stepdaughter Clara has worked tirelessly for this foundation, despite her struggles. Her dear husband Grant has been her rock, managing the complex financial aspects while Clara focused on what she does best, being a beautiful symbol of her father's legacy." Laughter rippled through the crowd, Clara's hands clenched in her lap. "But tonight," Iris's smile was pure poison. "We need to address some concerns about Clara's ability to continue in her role." Grant stood, moving toward the microphone. "It pains me to say this, but my wife has been struggling with delusions, paranoia. Just yesterday, she accused me of stealing from the foundation, me who has done nothing but protect her father's legacy." Murmurs through the crowd. Clara saw the federal agent's shifting position. "We've consulted with specialists," Grant continued, pulling out documents, the commitment papers. "And we believe, for Clara's own safety and the Foundation's future, she needs professional help." "No," Clara said, standing. Her voice carried across the ballroom. "I don't." Grant's face darkened. "Darling, please, don't make this harder. You killed my father." The words dropped into the silence like bombs. "She's clearly having an episode," Iris said quickly, moving toward Clara. "Someone called Dr. Reeves." "Dr. Reeves is already in federal custody," Judge Patterson said, standing. "As you're about to be." The room erupted. Federal agents moved in from all sides, badges out, weapons visible. Guests screamed, backed away. Photographers started shooting pictures that would make front pages nationwide. "Grant Cole, Iris Penn," the lead agent announced. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, murder in the first degree, and 37 other charges I'll be happy to enumerate at the station." "This is ridiculous," Grant shouted, but there was fear in his eyes now. "Clara's insane. Tell them." But the room was silent, watching as handcuffs clicked around the wrists of the golden couple who'd ruled their social circle through fear and favors. "The evidence," Iris said, her composure finally cracking. "There's no evidence." "Your complete confession to murdering Marcus Hale with Digitalis," Clara said, pulling out her phone. "The recording of you and Grant planning to have me committed and then killed. The proof of $31 million in theft. That evidence?" She played the recording, Grant and Iris's voices filling the ballroom, confessing to everything. The crowd gasped, some people backing away from Iris and Grant as if murder might be contagious. "Reed," Grant said suddenly. "Where's Reed?" "My son is safe," Clara said. "And he's not your son. You were never his father. You were just the man who happened to live in our house while plotting to kill us." As the agents led Grant and Iris away, Iris turned back, her perfect face twisted with rage. "You stupid little girl, you think you've won? You have no idea how to run the Foundation, how to manage that money. You'll lose everything within a year." "No," Clara said, her voice carrying the strength of 25 years of suppressed rage finally released. "I'll build something beautiful, the way my father intended, the way my mother would have wanted, and you'll watch from prison as I erase every trace of you from our lives." The agents dragged them out, Grant shouting about lawyers, Iris maintaining her cold silence. The ballroom stood frozen, then erupted in chaos, people calling lawyers, reporters rushing to file stories, society matrons fainting or pretending to. Clara stood in the center of it all, finally free. Morrison appeared at her elbow. "Brilliantly done." "Where's Reed?" "Safe. Benjamin has him. They're watching on the news." Clara pulled out her phone, called Benjamin. He answered immediately. "Mom!" Reed's voice, bright with joy. "We saw everything. You were amazing." "Are you okay, baby?" "I'm better than okay. We're free, Mom. We're finally free." After the police left, after the guests dispersed, after the reporters were ushered out, Clara stood alone in the empty ballroom. The decorations looked garish now, like costume jewelry on a corpse. She opened Reed's envelope, reading his careful handwriting. "Mom, they tried to break you when you were 4. They tried to bury you when you were 18. They tried to erase you at 29. But you're still here, still standing, still fighting. Grandpa would be so proud. I'm proud. You're not just my mum. You're my hero. Love, Reed." Clara pressed the letter to her chest and cried, not tears of sadness, but of release, of victory, of finally being able to breathe after 25 years of suffocation. Tomorrow would bring lawyers, paperwork, rebuilding. But tonight, she was free. Chapter 7. The Art of Memory. 2 weeks after the arrests, Clara stood in the main gallery of the Museum of Natural History, watching her vision come to life. The exhibition was called Touch the Sky, A Sensory Journey, and it was unlike anything the museum had ever hosted. She hadn't meant to fall in love with Benjamin Hartley. She'd meant to survive, to save her son, to reclaim her inheritance. Love was a luxury she couldn't afford, a risk she wouldn't take. But Benjamin had done something no one else had ever done. He'd seen her, not as a victim to save or a problem to solve, but as a woman who'd been sleeping for 25 years and was finally waking up. It had started with tea. The morning after the gala, after the arrests had made every newspaper in New York, after Reed had finally fallen asleep in his own bed without fear for the first time in his life, Benjamin had appeared at her door with tea and croissants. "You don't have coffee," he'd said simply, "and you hate Grant's Colombian roast. I thought you might want to choose your own breakfast for once." Such a small thing, but Clara had stood in her doorway, looking at this man who'd noticed what she drank, who'd paid attention to her preferences instead of telling her what they should be, and felt something crack open in her chest. Now, 2 weeks later, she stood beside him as he ran his fingers over one of the exhibition pieces, a bronze sculpture meant to be touched, its surface telling a story through texture rather than sight. "You did this for him," Reed said, appearing beside them with his notebook, ever present. "For Benjamin." "Reed, it's okay, Mom. It's good." Her son studied Benjamin with those eyes that missed nothing. "He sees differently, like you learned to see differently." It was true. Benjamin had shared during one of their late-night evidence sessions that he was losing his sight. Macular degeneration, slow but inevitable. In 10 years, maybe less, he'd be blind. "It's why I notice everything now," he'd told her. "Every detail, every color, every expression. I'm storing them up." Clara had created this exhibition partly for him, partly for herself, a way to experience beauty beyond the visual, to understand that there were different ways of seeing, but also, though she wouldn't admit it aloud, to show him something, that she saw him too. "The opening's tomorrow," she said, watching Benjamin explore the sculpture. "The foundation board isn't happy. They wanted a traditional fundraiser." "The foundation board can adjust," Morrison said, entering the gallery with his usual perfect timing. "Half of them are under investigation for taking bribes from Grant anyway." The old lawyer had become a constant presence, helping Clara navigate the legal complexities of reclaiming her inheritance. $31 million had been recovered so far, with more hidden in offshore accounts they were still tracing. "Any news on the trial date?" Benjamin asked. "Spring. Grant's lawyers are trying to separate his trial from Iris's, claim he was manipulated by her." Morrison snorted. "As if anyone would believe Grant Cole could be manipulated by anyone." "He was, though," Clara said quietly. "Just not the way he thinks. Iris played him perfectly, let him believe he was the mastermind while she pulled the strings. He still doesn't realize she would have eliminated him eventually, too." They moved through the gallery, Reed documenting everything with his phone, already planning improvements for the educational components. He'd thrown himself into the foundation's work with the same intensity he'd brought to gathering evidence, as if helping others could somehow balance the scales of what had been done to them. "I have something to tell you all," Benjamin said suddenly, stopping beside a wall of textured panels that told the story of Marcus Hale's rise from poverty to fortune. "I've been offered a position. FBI Financial Crimes Division. They were impressed by the work on your case." Clara's heart stopped. That's wonderful." "It's in Washington." The words hung in the air like a curse. "When?" Reed asked, his voice smaller than usual. "They want me to start next month." Clara forced herself to smile, to be happy for him, to not show how the thought of him leaving made her chest feel hollow. "You should take it. It's an incredible opportunity." Benjamin looked at her with those green eyes that saw everything. "Is it?" Before Clara could answer, her phone rang. Iris's lawyer. "Mrs. Cole, your stepmother is requesting a meeting. She says she has information about your father that you need to know." Tell her no. She says it's about your mother, your biological mother. Clara's hand tightened on the phone. Her mother had died when she was 4. Cancer, her father had always said. But what if, like everything else, that had been a lie? Tomorrow, she heard herself say, after the exhibition opening. Rikers Island, 1 hour, supervised. She hung up to find everyone staring at her. You don't have to see her, Morrison said. Yes, I do. Clara looked at Reed. We need to know everything, even the ugly parts. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She stood at her bedroom window, her bedroom now, not Grant's. She'd had everything of his removed, and watched Manhattan glitter below. The city looked different now that she was free to leave it, smaller somehow, less imprisoning. A soft knock at her door. Reed entered, carrying 2 mugs of hot chocolate. Couldn't sleep either, she asked. I keep thinking about Benjamin leaving. Reed sat on her bed, looking younger than his 11 years. He's the first man who ever made you smile, really smile, not the fake one you did for Dad. Reed, you love him. It wasn't a question. It's complicated. No, it's not. You love him, he loves you, but you're both too scared to say it because you think you're protecting each other. Reed sipped his chocolate. Adults make everything complicated. When did you become so wise? When I had to be. They sat in comfortable silence. Then Reed said, I put something in his coat pocket. Reed, what did you do? Nothing bad. Just a letter. From you. I didn't write. The one you wrote 2 weeks ago, when he was working all night on the offshore accounts. You thought I was asleep, but I saw you writing it at the kitchen table. Then you threw it away. I rescued it. Clara's face burned. That letter, she'd poured everything into it. Every feeling she couldn't say aloud, every reason she was grateful, every way he'd changed her life. She'd thrown it away because it was too much, too honest, too dangerous. Reed Cole. Reed Hale, he corrected. I'm changing my name back to Grandpa's, and you needed him to read it, Mom. You needed to stop being scared. The next evening, the exhibition opening was a triumph. The gallery filled with people experiencing art through touch, sound, smell, and taste. Children laughed as they explored texture walls. Elderly patrons cried as they heard their memories transformed into music. It was everything Clara had envisioned. Art as connection rather than observation. Benjamin hadn't come. Clara told herself it didn't matter, that his absence didn't leave a void in the center of the celebration. She smiled, gave speeches, accepted congratulations, all while scanning the crowd for sandy hair and green eyes. He'll come, Reed said, appearing at her elbow with that supernatural ability to read her thoughts. But as the evening wound down, as the guests departed and the gallery emptied, Benjamin still hadn't appeared. Clara was helping the staff close when Morrison appeared, slightly out of breath. Rikers, he said. Now, Iris is being transferred to federal custody in the morning. This is your only chance. The ride to Rikers Island was silent, Reed beside her, Morrison in the front seat. The prison loomed against the night sky, all concrete and razor wire, a place where beauty went to die. Iris sat behind reinforced glass, wearing orange that made her skin look sallow. Without her perfect makeup, designer clothes and careful lighting, she looked like what she was, a middle-aged woman who'd built her life on other people's graves. Clara, she said, her voice still carrying that honeyed poison. You came. You said you had information about my mother. I do. Iris leaned forward. She didn't die of cancer. Clara's blood chilled. Your father had her committed. Postpartum psychosis, they called it. But really, she'd discovered his affairs. Multiple women, some barely legal. She threatened to leave to take you. So he had her locked away. You're lying. Roosevelt Hospital, psychiatric ward. 1999 to 2000. She died there. Suicide, officially, though the orderlies said she was getting better, talking about fighting for custody. Iris smiled, cold and sharp. Your precious father, the Saint Marcus Hale, drove your mother to madness and death because she inconvenienced him. Clara couldn't breathe. Why should I believe you? Because I kept the records, insurance in case Marcus ever turned on me. They're in a safety deposit box at Chase, under your mother's maiden name. Box 472. Iris sat back. I thought you should know what kind of man your father really was. He and I were more alike than you want to believe. No, Reed said suddenly, his young voice cutting through the glass. Grandpa made mistakes, terrible ones, but he loved Mom. He tried to protect her. You only knew how to destroy. Iris looked at Reed, really looked at him, and for a moment Clara saw something flicker in her stepmother's eyes. Regret, perhaps, or recognition. You're right, Iris said quietly. I only knew how to destroy. It's all anyone ever taught me. She looked at Clara. Your mother's name was Amelia. She loved you. Everything else I told you about her was true. She did sing to you, did call you her little star. She loved you until they took her away. The guard announced time was up. As Clara stood to leave, Iris called out, Clara, don't become me. Don't let bitterness be your inheritance. Outside the prison, Clara stood in the parking lot, gulping cold air, trying to process everything. Her father, her hero, had been deeply flawed. Her mother had been a victim too. Nothing was simple. Nothing was clean. Mom! Reed touched her arm. I'm okay. No, Mom, look. Benjamin stood by their car, holding a bouquet of white roses, her mother's favorite, though he couldn't have known that. He looked uncertain, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. I read your letter, he said simply. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Reed shouldn't have. I'm glad he did. Benjamin stepped closer. I've been in love with you since you walked into my office, terrified but determined, ready to fight for your son and yourself. I didn't want to say anything because you needed a friend, not another complication. But that letter... What letter? Morrison asked, confused. The one where Mom said she loves him and wants him to stay, and that he makes her feel like the world has colors again, Reed supplied helpfully. Reed! What? It's true. Benjamin laughed, soft and surprised. Is it? Clara looked at this man who'd saved them, who'd seen her at her worst, and still looked at her like she was something precious, who was willing to walk away to protect her from another complication. Yes, she said, it's true. He kissed her then, there in the parking lot of Rikers Island, with the city lights glittering across the water, and Reed cheering and Morrison muttering about young people and their timing. It wasn't a fairy tale kiss. It was better. It was real, complicated, imperfect, and absolutely right. Stay, Clara whispered against his lips. Please stay. I already turned down the FBI job, Benjamin admitted. This afternoon I couldn't leave, not when everything I want is here. Gross, Reed said, but he was smiling. But also, finally. As they drove back to Manhattan, Clara held Benjamin's hand in the back seat, while Reed peppered Morrison with questions about the legal precedents for recovering assets hidden in safety deposit boxes. The city flowed past, alive with possibility. Tomorrow she would retrieve her mother's records, would learn the full truth about her parents, would continue rebuilding the foundation into something worthy. There would be pain in those discoveries, complications, difficult truths. But tonight, she was a woman who'd been kissed in a prison parking lot by a man who saw her truly, whose son was safe and brilliant and free, whose life was finally her own to shape. It wasn't the ending she'd imagined when she was 4, newly motherless, or 18, newly trapped. It was better. It was real. Chapter 8. The trial begins. The New York County Courthouse stood like a fortress of justice against the March sky, its columns catching the weak spring sunlight. Clara climbed its steps with Reed on one side and Benjamin on the other, their presence steadying her against the crowd of reporters shouting questions. "Mrs. Cole, how does it feel to face your husband in court? Clara, is it true Iris Penn killed 3 husbands? Will Reed testify against his father?" Benjamin's hand found the small of her back, guiding her through the chaos. "Straight ahead. Don't engage." Inside, the courthouse hummed with anticipation. The trial of Grant Cole and Iris Penn had become the most watched case in New York, a story of greed and betrayal that tabloids couldn't resist. Society murder, the Post had called it. The Black Widow of the Upper East Side, according to the Times. Courtroom 318 was packed. Clara recognized half of Manhattan's elite, come to watch the fall of 2 of their own. Or perhaps, she thought cynically, to ensure their own secrets weren't exposed in the process. Grant sat at the defense table, his silver hair still perfect, his suit immaculate. Prison hadn't diminished his arrogance. If anything, it had crystallized it into something harder, more dangerous. His eyes found Clara across the room, and his lips curved into that smile that had once made her feel special, then trapped, now nothing at all. Iris sat separately, her lawyer having successfully argued for severed trials. She wore a conservative navy dress, her hair pulled back, playing the role of wronged widow rather than Black Widow. But Clara saw the calculation in every gesture, the performance in every expression. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Williams. Judge Williams was Morrison's masterstroke, a black woman who'd grown up in Harlem, worked her way through law school, and had no patience for the privilege destroying lives for sport. Grant's lawyers had tried to have her recused. They'd failed. "Be seated." Judge Williams surveyed the courtroom with sharp eyes. "Before we begin, I want to make something clear. This courtroom will maintain decorum. Any outbursts, any attempts to turn this into a spectacle, and I will clear the gallery. Mr. Morrison, is the prosecution ready?" Morrison stood, 81 years old, but radiating the energy of a man half his age. "We are, Your Honor." "Mr. Ashford, is the defense ready?" Lawrence Ashford, Grant's lawyer, the same man who'd been at the Meridian Club planning Clara's commitment, stood with obvious reluctance. He'd tried to withdraw from the case when he learned he'd been recorded, but Grant had threatened him with exposure of his own crimes. "We are, Your Honor." "Then let's begin. Mr. Morrison, your opening statement." Morrison moved to the center of the courtroom with the deliberation of a man who'd waited decades for this moment. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a story about theft. Not just the theft of money, though $31 million is certainly significant. Not just the theft of property, though estates and assets were stolen. This is about the theft of a life. Multiple lives." He turned to look at Grant. The defendant, Grant Cole, married Clara Hale when she was 18 years old, grieving her father's death. He promised to protect her, to manage her inheritance until she was ready. Instead, he systematically stole everything while plotting to have her committed to a psychiatric institution and likely killed. Gasps from the gallery. Judge Williams banged her gavel once sharp. Morrison continued, his voice carrying the weight of evidence. "You will hear recordings of Grant Cole and Iris Penn discussing the murder of Marcus Hale with Digitalis. You will see forged documents, fraudulent transfers, and psychiatric evaluations for a woman who never met the doctor who supposedly treated her. You will hear from an 11-year-old boy who spent 3 years gathering evidence because no adult would protect his mother." He paused, letting that sink in. "Grant Cole is not a husband who made mistakes. He is a predator who saw a grieving teenager with a fortune and decided to take both her money and her life. We will prove this beyond any reasonable doubt." The first witness was Dorothy Chen, Marcus Hale's former secretary. At 73, she moved carefully to the witness stand, but her voice was strong as she took the oath. "Ms. Chen," Morrison began, "how long did you work for Marcus Hale?" 22 years. "Did you know Iris Penn during that time?" "Yes. She married Mr. Hale when Clara was 4. Dorothy's eyes found Clara in the gallery. The last year of his life, Mr. Hale discovered Iris was having an affair. He showed me photographs. Iris with a younger man. That man was Grant Cole. The courtroom erupted. Judge Williams gavelled for order. Mr. Hale was planning to divorce Iris and change his will. He died 2 weeks later. Morrison introduced the appointment book into evidence, then played a recording Dorothy had made of Marcus's last phone call to her. Marcus Hale's voice filled the courtroom, warm and worried. "Dorothy, if anything happens to me, protect Clara. Iris is poison, and I think she knows I'm leaving her. Promise me you'll protect my daughter." Clara closed her eyes, hearing her father's voice after all these years. Reed's hand found hers, squeezing tight. But it was the second day that destroyed Grant's defense. The prosecution calls Reed Hale to the stand. Reed walked to the witness stand with remarkable composure for an 11-year-old. He wore his school uniform, looking young and vulnerable, but his eyes were steady as he took the oath. "Reed," Morrison said gently, "I know this is difficult. Can you tell us when you first realized something was wrong in your home?" "When I was 8, I saw my father, Grant, put something in my mother's tea. She got very sleepy and confused. Later, I found the bottle. It was Xanax prescribed to her, but she didn't know she was taking it." "Objection!" Ashford shouted. "The witness is a child." "A child who documented everything," Reed interrupted, his voice clear. "I have photographs of the pills, the prescriptions, even video of Grant putting them in her food." Judge Williams leaned forward. "You have video?" "Yes, Your Honor. I started recording things when I was 9. I knew something was wrong, but no one would listen to a kid, so I decided to get proof." Morrison played the videos, Grant drugging Clara's coffee, discussing with someone on the phone how a little extra will keep her compliant, laughing about how easy it was to control her. Clara watched the jury's faces change from skepticism to horror to rage. "Reed," Morrison continued, "tell us about the night at the Meridian Club." Reed described following Grant, climbing the fire escape, recording the conversation about committing Clara and sending him to Switzerland. His voice remained steady, but Clara saw his hands tremble slightly. "I was scared," Reed admitted. "Not for me, but for my mom. They were going to lock her away and then kill her, make it look like suicide." "Is it?" Reed pulled out his notebook, the one he'd carried for 3 years. "I have here a copy of an email from Grant to Dr. Reeves discussing the final solution to the Clara problem. Those were his words. The email was entered into evidence. The jury looked at Grant with undisguised disgust. On the 3rd day, Benjamin testified as the forensic accountant who'd uncovered the financial crimes. He walked the jury through every forged document, every fraudulent transfer, every hidden account. It was devastating in its thoroughness. "Mr. Hartley," Morrison asked, "in your professional opinion, what was the ultimate goal of this fraud?" "Complete control and eventual elimination of Clara Cole. The pattern is clear: systematic isolation, financial theft, psychological manipulation, and finally, physical removal. This wasn't just fraud. It was attempted murder in slow motion." The 4th day brought Dr. Reeves, who had made a deal with prosecutors. He looked like a broken man, his hands shaking as he admitted to falsifying psychiatric evaluations, to prescribing medications for Clara that Grant administered without her knowledge, to agreeing to commit her for a fee. "Grant Cole paid me $300,000 over 3 years, he said, to create a paper trail showing Clara Cole was mentally unstable." "Did you ever meet Clara Cole?" Morrison asked. Never. Everything was fabricated." "And Marcus Hale's death certificate?" Reeves looked at the floor. Grant and Iris gave me $50,000 to sign it without an autopsy. They said it was natural causes, but digitalis poisoning mimics a heart attack perfectly. On the 5th day, it was Clara's turn. She took the stand wearing the same emerald green her father had loved, her mother's pearls at her throat. She looked at Grant, at Iris, at the crowd that had watched her destruction as entertainment, and felt nothing. They were already ghosts. "Miss Hale," Morrison began, "tell us about your marriage to Grant Cole." Clara spoke for 2 hours, about being 18 and grieving, about Iris's manipulation, about 11 years of controlled doses and controlled bank accounts and controlled movements, about discovering the truth, about Reed's courage, about reclaiming her life. "Do you hate Grant Cole?" Morrison asked finally. Clara considered the question. Number hate would mean he still has power over me. He's just nothing. A thief who stole 11 years I can't get back, but I have the rest of my life, and Reed has his whole life, and we're free. That's all that matters. Ashford's cross-examination tried to paint her as bitter, vindictive, possibly unstable as Grant had claimed. "Isn't it true you're in a relationship with Benjamin Hartley, the forensic accountant?" "Yes." "Isn't that convenient? You're sleeping with your star witness." Benjamin started to stand, but Clara smiled. "Mr. Ashford, I spent 11 years with a man who drugged me, stole from me, and planned to kill me. Benjamin Hartley helped save my life, treated my son with respect, and has never once told me what to think or feel or drink or wear. If that's convenient, then yes, it's very convenient to be with someone who sees me as a human being rather than a bank account with a pulse." The gallery erupted in applause before Judge Williams could gavel for order. The jury deliberated for exactly 3 hours. On the count of murder in the first degree, we find the defendant, Grant Cole, guilty. On the count of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty. On the count of fraud exceeding $10 million, guilty. The verdicts continued for 20 minutes, guilty on all 37 counts. Grant's face never changed expression, as if he couldn't quite believe that his perfect plan had failed, that an 11-year-old boy and a woman he'd deemed broken had destroyed him. As the bailiffs led him away, he looked at Clara one last time. "You'll fail without me. You don't know how to manage that money." "Watch me," Clara said. Outside the courthouse, Manhattan had never looked more beautiful. Cherry blossoms were beginning to bloom in City Hall Park, and the air held the promise of spring. "Mom," Reed said, "we won." "Yes, baby, we won." Benjamin's arm came around her shoulders, solid and warm and real. What now? Clara looked at her son, at the man she loved, at the city that had been her prison and was now her kingdom. Now we live, and next month we finish this with Iris. Chapter 9. Reed's testimony at Iris's trial. The morning Reed Hale was to testify at Iris Penn's trial, Manhattan woke to an unseasonable April snow, as if nature itself wanted to blanket the ugly truths about to be revealed in white. Clara stood at Reed's bedroom door, watching him knot his tie with the precision of someone 3 times his age. He'd grown 2 inches since Grant's conviction, as if removing that weight had literally allowed him to expand. "You don't have to do this," she said for the 100th time. Reed's hands never paused. "Yes, I do. Iris killed Grandpa. She destroyed you for 25 years. Someone needs to tell the truth about what she is." Benjamin appeared in the doorway with coffee and hot chocolate. In the month since Grant's conviction, he'd essentially moved in, though they maintained the fiction of his own apartment. Reed had already started calling him Ben, though never Dad. That word had been poisoned beyond redemption. "The car's here," Benjamin said. "Morrison's already at the courthouse. He says Iris's lawyer is planning something." "Let them plan," Reed said, picking up his evidence notebook. The ride to the courthouse was quiet. Clara held Reed's hand while Benjamin drove, taking the long way to avoid the worst of the photographer gauntlet. But they were still waiting, dozens of them, shouting questions. "Mr. Hale! Reed! How does it feel to testify against your grandmother?" Reed stopped so suddenly that Clara nearly stumbled. He turned to the nearest reporter, his young face composed. "She was never my grandmother. Grandmothers bake cookies and tell stories. Iris Penn poisoned my grandfather with foxglove tea and counted his money while he died. If you're going to report this story, at least get the facts right." The reporters fell silent, then erupted in more questions, but Benjamin was already guiding them inside. Courtroom 318 looked the same, but felt different. Grant's absence changed the energy. Iris sat alone at the defense table, her beauty somehow sharper without his bulk beside her. She wore pearl grey, her hair in a French twist, every inch the grieving widow rather than the black widow she was. Her lawyer was new, Jameson Clark, known for getting guilty clients reduced sentences through jury manipulation. All rise for Judge Patricia Williams. The same judge, thank God. She'd seen through Grant, she'd see through Iris. "Mr. Morrison, is the prosecution ready to continue?" "We are, Your Honor. We call Reed Hale to the stand." Reed walked to the witness box with his notebook, his phone, and a small leather journal Clara didn't recognize. He'd already been sworn in during Grant's trial, so he simply sat, adjusted the microphone, and waited. "Reed," Morrison began, "you testified at Grant Cole's trial about the conspiracy between him and Iris Penn. Today, I want to focus specifically on Iris Penn's role. Can you tell us about the first time you realized she was dangerous?" Reed opened his notebook. "December 15th, 3 years ago. I was 8. I heard her on the phone in the garden. She said, 'Marcus was easier to kill than my first husband. At least Marcus trusted me.' She was laughing. Iris's lawyer objected immediately. 'Hearsay, Your Honor.' 'It's not hearsay if I have the recording,' Reed said calmly, pulling out his phone. Morrison smiled. "Your Honor, we'd like to enter into evidence audio file 37B, recorded by Reed Hale on December 15th, 3 years ago." The recording played through the courtroom speakers, Iris's voice clear and amused. "Marcus was easier to kill than my first husband. At least Marcus trusted me. Richard fought the digitalis, took 3 doses before his heart finally stopped. Marcus only needed 1 in his evening tea." The jury looked horrified. Several people in the gallery gasped. "Reed," Morrison continued, "when did you start recording Iris Penn?" "After I heard that call. I saved my allowance for 3 months to buy recording devices. I knew no one would believe an 8-year-old without proof." "And what did you discover?" Reed opened the leather journal. "This was my grandfather's, hidden in the wine cellar. Iris didn't know about it." He began reading. "March 2nd, the year he died. Iris is poisoning me. I can feel it. The weakness, the chest pains, just like her first husband's symptoms. Changed my will in secret. If I die, investigate her." "Objection!" Clark was on his feet. "This journal hasn't been authenticated." "I can authenticate it," Dorothy Chen called from the gallery. "That's Marcus's handwriting. I saw it every day for 22 years. Judge Williams nodded. "I'll allow it." Reed continued reading entries, each more damning than the last. Marcus had discovered Iris's affair with Grant, her first husband's suspicious death, even evidence that she'd killed a boyfriend in college, made to look like a suicide. "She's a serial killer," Reed said simply. "She targets wealthy men, marries them, then kills them when she's secured the inheritance." "That's a serious accusation," Morrison said. "It's not an accusation. It's a pattern." Reed pulled out a chart he'd made. 4 dead men, all wealthy. All died of heart conditions within 2 years of marrying Iris Penn. Combined inherited wealth, approximately $73 million. The courtroom was silent. Clark's cross-examination was vicious, even for a defense attorney going after a child. "You hate Iris Penn, don't you?" "I don't hate her. I understand her." "What does that mean?" Reed looked directly at Iris. "She was broken young, like my mom. But instead of surviving it, she let it turn her into a monster. She decided that if the world hurt her, she'd hurt it back, one dead husband at a time. You're 11 years old. You can't possibly understand." "I understand murder," Reed interrupted. "I understand theft. I understand that she looked at my 4-year-old mother and saw another victim to create, another life to destroy. I understand that she would have killed my mother too, eventually, after she'd squeezed every penny from her." Clark tried another approach. "Your mother is in a relationship with Benjamin Hartley, correct?" "Yes." "And you like him?" "He's the first adult man in my life who's never lied to me." "Don't you want a father figure?" Reed laughed, sharp and bitter. "I had a father figure. He drugged my mother and plotted her murder. I had a grandfather figure, but Iris poisoned him when I was a baby. I don't need a father figure. I need adults who don't commit felonies." "No further questions," Clark said, defeated. Morrison stood for redirect. "Reed, one last question. What do you want to come from this trial?" Reed thought for a moment. "I want my grandfather to have justice. I want my mother to have peace. And I want Iris Penn to never hurt another family again." As Reed stepped down from the witness stand, he did something unexpected. He walked to the defense table and placed a photograph in front of Iris. Clara at 4 years old, the day before Iris arrived, smiling and innocent. "That's who you destroyed," he said quietly. "A little girl who'd just lost her mother. I hope you see her face every day for the rest of your life." Iris, for the first time in either trial, showed real emotion. Her face crumpled, just for a moment, before the mask returned. But the jury had seen it. The crack in the facade, the glimpse of the monster beneath. The rest of the trial proceeded quickly. More evidence, more recordings, financial experts showing how Iris had systematically prepared to steal everything from Clara since the day she married Marcus. But it was Reed's testimony that the newspapers would quote, Reed's chart that would be reproduced in every article, Reed's quiet dignity that would be remembered. The verdict came on a Thursday afternoon. Guilty on all counts. Murder in the first degree, conspiracy, fraud, theft, life without parole. As the bailiffs led Iris away, she looked back at Clara and Reed. "I'm sorry," she said, and for once it might have been true. "I know," Clara replied, "but it doesn't change anything." Outside the courthouse, Reed stood between Clara and Benjamin, facing the wall of reporters. "Mr. Hale, how does it feel to have justice?" Reed considered the question. "It doesn't bring my grandfather back. It doesn't give my mother back 25 years of her life. It doesn't erase what they did, but it ends it. And ending it means we can begin." "Begin what?" Reed smiled, the first real smile any of them had seen from him in public. "Living. Just living." That night, Clara found Reed in his room, the evidence notebook finally closed, his charts and recordings packed away in boxes for the prosecutors to archive. "It's over," she said. "The trials are over," Reed corrected. "The rest is just beginning." Clara sat beside him. "Are you okay?" "I'm 11 years old, and I just sent 2 people to prison for the rest of their lives." "They sent themselves to prison. You just made sure they got there." Reed leaned against her. "Mom, I want to change my name legally, not just back to Hale. I want a new middle name." "What name?" "Marcus, Reed Marcus Hale, for Grandpa." Clara kissed the top of his head. "He would be so proud of you." "I know," Reed said quietly, "but I wish I could have saved him too." Chapter 10. Justice and Love. 6 months after the trials ended, Clara stood in the museum's grand hall, watching her son teach a group of children how to read Braille beside the man who had saved them both. The Foundation's new initiative, Art Education for Visually Impaired Children, had been Reed's idea, but it was Benjamin who'd made it real, using his connections in the disability community to find teachers, develop programs, create something beautiful from the ashes. "Mom!" Reed called, his face bright with joy. "Mira just read her first complete sentence in Braille." Clara crossed to them, watching the little girl beam with pride. Benjamin's hand found Clara's automatically, and she felt that familiar warmth spread through her chest. Morrison's voice interrupted them. "Clara, Reed, might I have a word?" They followed the old lawyer to Clara's office, formerly Grant's, now filled with her father's books and her mother's photographs. "What's wrong?" Clara asked. "Nothing's wrong. In fact, something's very right." Morrison pulled out a thick envelope. "Iris Penn died yesterday." Clara felt nothing, then everything, then nothing again. "How?" "Heart attack. Natural, verified. The irony isn't lost on me." Morrison handed her the envelope. "She left you this." Clara opened the envelope with steady hands. Inside was a letter and a small key. "Clara, by the time you read this, I'll be dead. Your son was right. I was broken young. My mother sold me to my first husband when I was 15. When I poisoned him 3 years later, I felt nothing but relief. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I want you to know that in my twisted way, I did love you. You were the daughter I never had. I destroyed you trying to protect you from becoming me. The key is to a storage unit in Queens. Everything I stole, everything of your mother's I hid, everything of your father's Grant didn't know about. It's all there. Your son is remarkable. Protect him. He's going to change the world. Don't become me. Remember me as a cautionary tale. Iris." The storage unit was like stepping into Clara's childhood. Her mother's jewelry, wedding dress, her father's first editions, photographs, home videos, even Clara's baby clothes. "She kept everything," Benjamin said, amazed. "She stole everything," Reed corrected, "but at least she preserved it." That evening, as they sorted through boxes, Reed suddenly said, "You should get married." Clara and Benjamin both froze. "Reed," Clara began, "I'm serious. You love each other. Just make it official." Benjamin stood, crossed to Clara, and dropped to one knee. "He's right." He pulled out a small box. "I've been carrying this for 2 months. Clara Hale, will you marry me?" The ring was simple, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds. "It was my grandmother's," Benjamin said. "She was a teacher who married a librarian. They had no money but 57 years of happiness." "Say yes, Mom. Say yes to being happy." Clara looked at Benjamin, this good man who'd appeared in their darkest moment and brought light. "Yes," she said. "Yes to happy." The wedding was small. Just Morrison, Dorothy Chen, Reed, and a few of Benjamin's friends. Clara wore her mother's dress. Reed was the best man and gave a speech that made everyone cry. "My mom was 4 when she lost her first mother, 18 when she lost her father, 29 when she lost herself, but she's 30 now and she's found everything, herself, justice, and love. Benjamin isn't my father. I had one of those and he was terrible. But Ben is my family, and that's better." As Clara and Benjamin danced their first dance, Reed played piano, not a sad song but something bright and hopeful and new. Grant would die in prison 15 years later alone. Iris was already gone, but Clara, Benjamin and Reed were alive, together, and free. And in the end, that was the only justice that mattered. The end.